This oceanside verbo is about to become the backdrop for an unforgettable vacation memory.
I'm not big on fighting these days, but I don't call the cops. And I'm not big on scrapping lately. When I start, I don't stop. I just need one more person to hate me talk that talk. One more problem might make me kill them all. I'm a heartbreaker, kicker. I'm a hot trigger, nasty words. I got 2 fingers, kissers. I'm a dirtbag, no good bags. No more Mr. Nice Guy, so go ahead and get mad. I'll show you how easy I turn a tough guy to a dead man. I ain't your buddy. Haters are obsessed fans. If we were buddies, trust I crack a bud just like a red can. Bedpan full of piss and vinegar. Head scan said that I'm not crazy, but I'm similar. Let's dance, let hands, homie, you get slapped fast. Trust me, you're a midget, I'm a monster. Every slap I throw is a finisher. I just need one more person to hate me. One more problem might make me.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Smack Talk Live. I'm Coach along with Lone Wolf, and tonight we will be going through the NFL and talking. I guess it's kind of a draft preview. It's not our mock draft, Lone Wolf, but talking about what we feel teams need to do in the draft to have a chance next year.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, we're not going to get into the exact picks. We'll talk about players, obviously, but it's more about the teams themselves and kind of the routes that we think they will go and the team needs. And some teams have lots of needs, but
you can say that again.
We'll try to hone in on some specific things that we want or think they should do to be competitive next year.
Right, and that's exactly it. There's some stuff, and we'll talk about a few things that one story that came out. It was either yesterday or today. I just watched some videos of it today. It might have happened yesterday, but we'll start with that. I'm not sure if you heard. The Trevor Lawrence drama, Lone Wolf?
Oh, no, I did not hear this. No.
So he made some comments that he was basically he was not one of those guys that was win at all cost.
Oh, okay.
That to me that's concerning, and we'll get into that more when we do our mock draft.
Yeah.
But that's concerning to me. And I said it. I said I'm not on the Trevor Lawrence bandwagon.
Right.
I think he's all about the show, and I don't think he really cares if he wins or loses. He just happens to be on Clemson, who they won a national title without him.
Yeah, I mean it's an amazing program. Dabo Swinney has made that a perennial powerhouse program.
People forgot about a guy that used to be there by the name of Deshaun Watson.
Right.
I mean, so
and not every Clemson quarterback is going to be amazing. It's kind of like you look at a lot of these programs that are really, really good in college football. That doesn't mean that the quarterback is necessarily going to be a good quarterback in the NFL.
Right.
Ohio State's a prime example, as we talked about many, many times. But yeah, I mean, you look at some of the quarterbacks that come from Clemson, and I don't remember Tajh Boyd was there when Dabo Swinney was there. I'd have to look back, but not every Clemson quarterback is going to succeed in the NFL.
So. Well, right, exactly, and that's the thing. That's exactly, the thing that I think we're trying to get at here is that it's not always going to be. You're not always going to have a superstar under center for you, basically.
Well, and then translating to the NFL, I mean, that's the thing. Some guys, will do that. And you'll find guys in later rounds that have been able to do that. And the reason for that is the system that they're in and how they play quarterback. And that's why they succeed at the next level. I would be very concerned about somebody saying something like that, because if you ask starting NFL quarterbacks right now, I mean, are you kidding me? Those guys are out there and they're definitely doing whatever it takes to win, you know? And I don't care. I don't care who it is. And if you don't, your teammates will sense that, and they may not want to play for you. You know, that's concerning. Yeah.
Well, and that's that's exactly the point, is that you may not, you're going to lose your teammates really, really fast. So and like I said, we'll delve more into that next week when we do our mock draft. But this week we are focusing on team needs, what we feel these teams need to do. This doesn't mean that the local pundits and
the professional pundits,
the quote unquote professionals feel these teams need to do. It's what we feel they need to do.
So now, and that's do you want to start in draft order or alphabetical order? How do you want to do it?
We can go draft order.
Okay, that would be easy.
It makes it easier on us.
Yeah.
To do that. So, we'll start. Why don't we go? Yeah, we'll just start with number one. It'll be easy.
Yeah.
The easiest thing to do. So, obviously we have the Jacksonville Jaguars at number one. Right. And they are one of those teams. Yeah, well, I shouldn't say you can't go wrong. It's going to be hard to go wrong. They need so many different things. Obviously, yes, quarterback.
Right.
They need a quarterback, but they need a lot of other things. They need linemen, they need receivers. I mean, I don't know what they don't need.
And that's the hard part, when we talk about it for some of these teams. But I will say this, last year we had picked Jacksonville to take a couple of players. I think we actually got a couple of those correct, or at least we were close on what they did. And I think overall we thought they had a really good draft last year.
Yeah.
They have some good players that they picked up there, and they have a few good players on their team.
Yeah, and I was not expecting them to be as bad as they were. I didn't think they were going to be great, but I did not see them being that bad. I thought they had a really good draft, and maybe in a couple of years that it'll work out, but it's hard sailing. How do you sell a fan base on this when you look at that roster?
Yeah.
And there's just holes everywhere.
Well, I think what you want to do is, obviously we know Jacksonville needs a quarterback. Of course we know that. And they have for a long time. But and this is a point that I've read, and this is a point that you and I have hammered home for so long. Only one quarterback drafted in the top 5 over the past 20 years has won a Super Bowl as a starter. Only one. And that was Eli Manning.
Right.
Over the past 20 years, no one else has done it. So everybody can say, well, this will be the time. This will be the year. I'm sorry, but 1 in 20 years is not a really good odds. They're not really good odds. So, yeah, they've got a lot of other things. I think part of the problem this year, Coach, is that there isn't a guy who you would take at number 1 other than a quarterback. Meaning, unless you were maybe reaching a little bit, because last year you could have said, okay, Chase Young easily could have been the number 1 pick, right?
And I said that I would have taken Chase Young over.
Right. This year, I don't see a guy like that where you say, okay, this defensive guy. So Jacksonville probably won't do that. They'll probably take Trevor Lawrence at number 1.
Yeah, and again, I don't want
Right. Yeah, I know.
We don't want to lose sight of what we're doing here, but yeah, there isn't that one guy where you're like, wow, this guy could be a
Yeah.
transformational player for your organization, like Chase Young. So what do you do? Do you go with the quarterback, or do you try to build? If I'm Jackson, I look at it like this: there are other quarterbacks out there in this year's draft, and you still have Minshew there.
Yep.
He wasn't great, but it wasn't like he was horrible. Do you possibly now with we're getting a little ahead of ourselves, but
Right.
all the professionals are saying Trevor Lawrence is going to Jacksonville. Well, now with these comments coming out, do you possibly look at trading that pick and getting more draft picks because you don't have that one guy like Chase Young to sit
Right.
there and say he can be a cornerstone player for us?
I almost think you could. I mean, there are other teams that want a quarterback, and going the number one spot. How do you build a franchise? You build it in the trenches. Urban Meyer has come out and said he wants a great defensive line. Well, if you're going to get that and you want a transformational player, you might be able to find them a little bit later on in that first round. So, and they really do have a need up front. I mean,
No, yeah,
investing in the
absolutely.
quarterback and protecting the quarterback are key in today's NFL. So they really should almost go for a lineman. They need a lineman of some type.
Right.
So
So,
yeah,
so again, and we'll break it down, but they
but that's
again
a team need. I mean, absolutely a team need there.
the again I don't think they can go wrong with whoever they take,
Right.
but it's just one of those things where it's like, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
And that's what they get paid the big bucks for. Um, Moving on to the number 2 pick, the New York Jets. Obviously now they traded Sam Darnold, which
Right.
I would have been okay with them keeping him for another year, but they felt they needed to move on, which is fine. So they need a quarterback.
Yeah.
They still need receivers. I think they're still void of skill players on that offense.
They really are.
I
Yeah.
think their defense has some pieces there. So really think they're going to focus on the offense this draft.
Yeah.
You got Robert Saleh there who can really take, I guess, I'm not going to say mediocre defensive talent, because I think San Francisco had above average talent at a lot of
For sure.
positions and great at others. But at the same time, I think he can take those average or maybe even subpar players and make them good players and have a viable defense with what they have. So I really think that the Jets are going to focus more on the offensive side of the ball um, than anything else this draft.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're going to. I mean, and both of these teams have 2 picks in the first round, so they have some opportunities to get some real quality players. I think they'll probably end up going quarterback, which is a need. I mean, they do have that as definite as an absolute need. But I think they'll end up drafting an offensive lineman. That's if you're going to pick a quarterback and he'll be your guy for the future. They do have a need on the line, and that would be a way to go. I'm sure Robert Saleh wouldn't mind another pass rusher because they do have a need there too. But I think they have more of a need, like you said, to fix the offensive side of the football first, and so then early on they'll go with that route instead.
Right. All right. So moving on to the number 3 pick. Now you have the San Francisco 49ers after all the trades being in there. So obviously we know the assumption is they trade up to get a quarterback, which they technically don't need a quarterback. You signed Jimmy Garoppolo to this huge contract,
Right.
and now all of a sudden you're like, yeah, we don't really like him.
Right. I mean, they're just completely bleh on Jimmy Garoppolo now.
So
Um,
that's going to be interesting there to see what they do
yeah.
there on at that. Besides them probably taking a quarterback,
Right.
um, they need to start replenishing that defense. They are
Absolutely.
their defense in 2 years got old, like really fast.
And they lost players as that happens to defenses because these guys are skilled, and then they went off in free agency and they got paid or they got traded or whatever.
Right.
But a lot of them left in free agency.
So
Um,
obviously they're
yeah.
getting Bosa back. You need to rebuild the secondary. Um, you've lost a lot of depth on the defensive line in the middle with some trades you made. But I think it's going to be hard for them
Hmm.
because they traded away a lot of draft picks to move up.
Right. Yeah,
So
their needs, I think they have, to me, they still have some decent skill players on offense. They drafted Brandon Ayuk last year. They have some guys that can get things done, and their offensive line is pretty good. But the quarterback is the biggest question mark based on the organization's moves and what they are looking at with Garoppolo. But I agree that defensively, that's where they're hurting. I mean, I think they need a corner. Um, I think that's an absolute need. I know pass rush makes a big difference, but they just don't have. I mean, Richard Sherman, is however old he is at this point. He's just
well,
they have some age there. They don't.
and Richard Sherman's not even on the roster right now.
Oh,
He's
okay,
technically still a free agent, as far as I know. I don't believe he's signed with anybody yet.
okay,
I
all
think
right.
he's came
Well,
out and said he's going to wait till after the draft before he signs.
sure.
Um, I
And,
think
and
he's
and
waiting
he's
to
just a
see.
leadership role player now. I think personally.
Right, exactly, and that's the thing. I think he's totally just a leader. He's one of those guys that I think can come in and really help you. Um, Eventually, maybe in situation once you get into the playoffs, things like that.
Right.
Um, but again, I think they're okay skill wise offensively. They probably could use some depth in the O line.
Sure.
Uh, they did make some signings in the O line, but I really think again, I just opposite of the Jets. I think they're going to focus on defense. Besides the first pick,
Right.
and well, again,
They'll take a quarterback, but yeah,
we're,
I mean,
we're gonna make our picks next week.
right.
Uh,
We won't talk about who that might be.
yeah,
I agree, though. I think they still have a need there, though. I
right,
mean, I think they do mostly from the standpoint that, like you were talking about, they just haven't expressed confidence in Garoppolo. So that's a team need.
right. All right, so moving on to number 4, the Atlanta Falcons. You know, offensively, I think they're okay. They could use a running back, but you're not going to pick a running back at number 4.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think they're going to focus either on the O line, maybe solidify that a little bit, or maybe go defense. They need to rebuild that defense. That defense was pretty porous last year, and it probably cost them a bunch of games.
Yeah.
So I really think they're going to focus on defense, especially their D line and linebacker. Um, so
Yeah, I think absolutely. They could even be one of those teams that trades down. I mean, they're at the number 4. So could they get a quality player there? Absolutely. Some people have them taking a tight end at that spot, which I really like, that pick. However, for their standpoint, I mean, they have needs on the defensive side of the football at all 3 levels. So I could see them going secondary, um, or maybe something else. But I'd almost say, coach, and I don't know what you feel. I mean, maybe they trade away or they trade down just to get more picks so they can focus on the defensive line and the secondary by getting more picks and being able to do that. But I think that's really where they have to hone in on because they got blown up, especially in the passing game last year.
Oh yeah, yeah. Their their like I said, their defense costed them multiple games last year. Um, you know, they were in a lot of games,
They
and
were, yeah.
if their defense could have did anything at the end of some of those games, they would possibly have been around, in the playoff hunt for that last playoff spot. So, it's one of those things where I really think, again, just like the 49ers, I think they're going to focus on defense
Hmm.
there. So, moving on to number 5, the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, they got you know what it looks like. Again, what it looks like, because I am not until you can lead your team to the playoffs in multiple occasions and be that top tier guy. I don't consider you a great
Star
quarterback.
quarterback, a great quarterback.
Everybody has good statistical games and seasons. Um, do it multiple times and get your team deep in the playoffs multiple times, then we'll talk. I think you're going to look at you look at Cincinnati again. I think they're a team that has needs really a lot of places, but I think they're going to focus O line, O line, O line. I think you have to. And maybe I think it's too early at this, at the number 5, anyways, to look at receiver. But again, as overall in the draft, I think they're going to focus on O line and skill guys and really try to surround Burrow with playmakers and protect him because the reason he got hurt was because their O line was so bad.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah, I think I look at this pick as this. The fans want you to take a receiver at number 5. The GM is probably thinking, "Oh, lineman."
Right.
Yeah, I mean, really, because it's not the sexy pick, but it's probably the smart pick at that number 5 spot. And there are some guys you could take at receiver, but I honestly, I think that's the best option for them is to get somebody on their O line. If you believe in this guy, you put him there as the number 1, you picked him, you wanted to run with him, then you have to protect him. And I absolutely agree with that. I mean, I think they have a few other needs, but they're going to probably address those later on in the draft. They have defensive end needs. They want to build up that line too, but yeah, if they're starting off, it's going to be on the O line and then maybe a receiver later on.
Right. All right, moving on to your AFC team, the Miami Dolphins. I'm going to let you take this since this is your adopted team.
Yep. And this is due to that trade that they had. So, yeah, I mean, I look at the Dolphins. Oh boy, well, I say that because I mean, really, you could say that they have a need at quarterback, couldn't you? I would say that. I'm not have no confidence in Tua. I really don't think he's going to be that great of a quarterback. So, will they go QB here? No. They have a real need if they believe in him and they want to as an organization. Then they have to get him a wide receiver. And I think at this pick, that's probably what they'll end up doing. They have some other offensive needs at running back and tight end, but I'm not too down on their running back situation. But I think here you go for one of those top tier wide receivers. That's what I would say for the Dolphins. Again, if you actually believe in Tua and you want him to be your guy, give him some weapons to work with at wide receiver because the Dolphins don't have great wide receivers right now. So they really need to focus on that.
And I agree. Yeah, I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that they're going to get a wide receiver here. It's who they're going to pick is going to be the question.
Right.
But like Yeah, I mean, you kind of stole my thunder here because I was going to say the same thing. Quarterback.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on Tua, and I don't care what people in Miami are saying. He is not the answer at quarterback. He's
Yeah.
not. And people can roast me all they want. Well, look what he's at. What did he do? They didn't make the playoffs last year.
I mean, he didn't even play in a lot of those games
Right.
anyway. Fitzpatrick did. So, you know,
So don't sit here and tell me that, oh, Tua. No, I don't think he's going to be a very good quarterback. So
right.
don't sit here and I'm not sold on him. I think if you're Miami, you go all you get that a receiver, maybe even two in this draft. Um, get some offensive linemen. Like you said, if you believe in Tua, you have to solidify the offense. Their defense is solid. Now, is it great? I wouldn't put them in the great category. They're solid. Um, they could probably use some help. At the linebacker, I'm not really great high on their linebackers. I like their secondary. I like some pieces they have in the D line. But again, if you say that Tua is your guy, you have to commit. You have to put people on the field with him to give him that opportunity, and that's
Right.
receiver and O line, maybe tight end there
Maybe.
to help that offense out.
Yeah.
'Cause-
And there's a really good tight end that they could draft, but
right.
I feel like they're going to go receiver at that spot.
So do I.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. The Detroit Lions. Well, let's put it this way. They are going to draft a guy that likes biting off kneecaps.
So whoever that happens to be, get ready here, Detroit, because that's.
I mean, what doesn't Detroit need?
I don't know. According to their head coach, they have a lot of places that could use some better players because I mean
Yeah,
I was looking at his
yeah.
film and
He
man,
he
there's a
threw
lot of
basically his
needs
whole
out there.
roster underneath the bus in his opening press conference.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean they have a lot of needs. I think I was just reading an article and the guy said the same thing about the kneecaps. It's bad. Um, I think they have offensive needs and well, I shouldn't say it. I hate saying this because they really do need everything. I mean, is Jared Goff the guy? I mean, probably not, but if you want him to succeed, you're going to have to give him a receiver. Now, could they go receiver at 7? Sure. Um, they lost a couple of receivers in free agency. I kind of think that an offensive lineman would probably be a nice, good, safe pick for you to take as the Lions. They need one desperately. That O line is not very good, and it really hasn't been in a while. I mean, offensive line in Detroit has allowed Matthew Stafford to get beat down constantly in his career there. So if they want to reverse that trend and maybe keep Jared Goff on the field and keep him upright, they should probably draft an offensive lineman.
Well, exactly. I absolutely agree. I really think you have a fundamental problem in Detroit, and that has been keeping your quarterback healthy. You can't say you haven't had a good quarterback. You've had a good
right. They
quarterback.
can't say that at all. Yeah, they had a great one.
The problem is you've never had an offensive line that could keep your quarterback on the field. So you have to start by building that offensive line from the interior out. You've tried through free agency, you've tried drafting a few guys, but you haven't really committed to it. So I really think they need to focus building their O line. Again, you can't really go wrong here for Detroit. You have so many
Right.
needs. But unfortunately, Detroit, I think next year you're going to be in the top 3 for a pick.
Yeah, I think they will be too. Yeah, they
So
will not be good next year.
they're not going to be good next year. So moving on to the Carolina Panthers. This has gotten really interesting. And again, we'll talk
Yes.
about what they're going to do with this pick. Um, you look at the Panthers, and I I really think they need to improve in the O line. They need a tight end, I think,
Mm-hmm.
and some
Absolutely.
receivers. They have probably one of the most dynamic running backs in the game. Have 2 quarterbacks that are viable in the NFL on your roster. Um, so I really think they're going to focus receiver, tight end, maybe some offensive linemen, maybe later in the draft to get a little bit of depth on the defense. But the defense wasn't that bad. So
No. And
um,
they spent most of their draft picks last year on defense, and they've got some really solid pieces there. So
right. So I really think they're going to focus um, on the offensive side of the ball here and
yeah,
try to give both Donald and Bridgewater weapons, whoever it is that's going to be on the field, but one of them give them weapons to see what they can do.
and I could see Carolina in this situation potentially trading out of this spot if there's a player that's still available at number 8 that somebody might want. And that might be a quarterback, it might be a receiver, it might be somebody that is really wanted because Carolina does have those needs at offensive lineman or receiver, and they could take that receiver right there at number 8. But it also depends if the 2 top rated receivers are gone at that point, which probably won't be. But if they are, I would opt to trade out of that spot maybe. And if somebody wanted a quarterback, they could jump in there, and then Carolina gets more picks to load up on a receiver later and some offensive linemen. You know,
Yeah, and I agree. I think they're eventually going to trade that pick. I don't think. Um, again, we're getting a little off base here,
yeah.
but I
Well,
don't
and I'm
want to
just
get
saying
into.
that just from the standpoint of they could do that, but I still agree with the needs that they have that you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah.
So, but we'll get into what we think they're going to do with the picks
Right. Right.
next week. Moving on, Denver Broncos. Um, I think they have a lot of needs.
Right.
um, they need a quarterback. They need a
Sure.
running back.
Absolutely.
They need a running back. They
Yeah.
need to start rebuilding that defense. You brought back Von Miller. Okay, great. Von Miller is probably not going to be in the league very much longer.
Yeah.
So you have multiple needs there in Denver. Again, I don't think you can really be too upset with whatever you get at that position. But again, they're also, I think, another candidate of drafting back to pick up more draft capital because they have so many needs to try to fill
Right.
going into the season.
I think they are an interesting team because I think they have less needs than some of the other teams that come before them. Which I mean, I get they're picking at this spot, but at the same time, uh, they are very desperate to have a good quarterback because they had picked up some decent receivers last year. They have some talent there. They do need a running back. I agree with that. Um, and I think I've seen some people say, "Oh, they have some defensive talent yet." I feel like that defense has aged, like you said, and I feel like they need a pass rusher. Um, I don't know what their sack count was last year, but that defense is not the same defense from the Super Bowl. People, it's a
No,
different defense. It's long since then. They could use somebody along that line to bolster it to really help. So yeah, quarterback for sure. But I think defensive line and or linebacker, depending on what kind of scheme that they're going to run, which I think they were running a 3-4. So if they keep doing that, they could use an edge like a linebacker perhaps. Because I agree. I mean, Von Miller is not getting any younger, so they need to find and groom a replacement.
Right. Yeah, I think unfortunately, I think for Denver, their fans there keep thinking, "Oh, that defense! Look at what we had when we won the Super Bowl." Well, how many years has it been since you won that Super Bowl?
Yeah, it's not the same defense
Not the
anymore.
same defense. So I really think that they need to look at it and be like, and be realistic and be like, okay, hey, yeah, we need to start rebuilding this defense instead of, hey, our defense is good. So,
Right.
moving on to the number 10 pick, the Dallas Cowboys.
This is easy. To me, it's easy.
Well, I mean, it's easy, but it's not easy at the same point. I really think that they need to start looking at their lines, their O line, their D line. Their defense is bad. So really, anything on the defense side of the ball. I know a lot of people are saying that they should take the tight end, and that if they get that tight end, they will be the best offense in the league. And I laughed because you have McCheeseburger coaching you.
Right.
You can't be the best offense in the league with McCheeseburger coaching you. You just can't.
You know, that offense was pretty good with Dak under center last year. They weren't the best offense in the league, but they were a good offense. But I just don't see an outstanding need on the offensive side of the football to start with. Like, I just think anywhere on the defensive side of the football is where you need to go. Some people have them picking a corner or something like that. Honestly, I'm more in line with what you said. You start up front in the line and you go from there. And their defensive line. I mean, they can't put pressure on anybody. That defense was an absolute sieve. Get a rusher, get somebody up front, get a nose tackle, put somebody on that defensive line who can put pressure on the quarterback, please.
Absolutely. You have to get some people in there that can do something up front. Their defense is bad, and I don't care. Switching your defensive coordinator is he might have been part of the problem. He wasn't the entire problem.
No.
Let's just put it that way. I have a hard time sitting there blaming just the coach, because if you're going to blame the defensive coordinator, you also have to blame the head coach because he's the one who hired the defensive coordinator. He's the one who the defensive coordinator reports to, and as the head coach, I don't care if you're quote unquote an offensive guy or a defensive guy. You should be able to look at a defensive game plan and be like, yeah, I don't like that.
Right.
You know, I'm a defensive coach, but you know, when I talk to our head coach and we talk about offense, I say, yeah, with what our opponent does on defense, that's not good. That's not going to work. We need to change the way we block that, or this or that. That's what should be going on. The McCarthy should have been going to their defensive coordinator and saying, "Hey, you do this. This is what they're going to do to us."
Mm-hmm.
But McCarthy has shown his entire career he's inept to doing that. He doesn't. Right. He can't do that. Whether it's just he thinks he's too good to do that, or he's just not very good at doing that.
Good at doing it, right? Yeah.
Whatever it is, but people in Dallas kind of like him, so they can have him.
Yeah, well, it's Jerry Jones, so go
So,
for it, buddy.
but anyways, yeah, they need to focus on their defense and their O line, I think, because I'll tell you right now, um, they're going to be in some cap purgatory here soon. Now with this Dak Prescott deal, with the Amari Cooper deal, with the Ezekiel Elliott deal, they've already had to cut some but they're better defensive guys
Yeah,
that were owed a lot of money. Um,
you really don't want to make that defense any worse because, yeah, wow, it
so
couldn't have gotten much worse. Let's put it that way.
so because I think eventually they're gonna have to either restructure or they'll release Elliott and Cooper, and because they're going to be in the same situation the Packers are with Aaron Rodgers
Right.
after this season, where they have to really are going to have to either get people to restructure deals or release people. So,
Right. Yeah.
moving on, New York Giants. Um, I mean, I know people were high on them throughout the season and what Judge did with them. I don't think their defense is as bad as I thought it was going to be. They need receivers.
Yeah.
That's a glaring need. They need the receivers. They could use a tight end. They could use running back. I mean, I know they have Saquon Barkley. He hasn't finished the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
That's a
When he's
concern.
on the field, he's dynamic, but
He can't stay healthy.
no.
So I understand he's probably one of the most dynamic offensive players in the league, but I don't know. Has he even played 16 games in a season yet?
I don't know the answer to that, but we can always find that out real quick.
Uh,
Yeah.
that would be my concern. So you really, if you think Daniel Jones is your guy, you need to surround him with players. And that's going to be the key. And I think that's a key with a lot of these teams with young quarterbacks is you're going to see them really jockeying for position for top playmakers throughout the entire draft.
Right.
You're going to see some people taking some flyers on some people.
So he did play 16 games his first year, then he played 13 games his next year, and then he played 2 last year.
Yeah, so I mean,
not trending in the right direction.
right, and I get it. He's had some major injuries, but when you have an ACL injury, and I believe the year before he sprained that knee.
Yeah.
Like you said, not trending in the right direction.
No, not at all. Yeah. I think for them, they definitely, and I know that they've done this, and this is their GM's kind of mantra. They want to bring in bodies along the lines, and they should, because they do need a defensive guy to bolster that pass rush. They do need more offensive linemen. Again, like you said, you're giving Daniel Jones a skill player. I want to give him an offensive lineman. I know they did that last year. I'm pretty sure they drafted their first pick was an offensive lineman. But it's not fun or sexy, but it's still what they need up front to protect him and give him the time that he needs to get the ball out of there. But yeah, their receivers. I mean, I think they got Kenny Galladay in free agency. They absolutely do need another receiver though, because yeah, horrible need there. And then on defense, I mean, they need a corner, and they probably need an edge rusher or another lineman of some type. So.
All right, so moving on to the Philadelphia Eagles. This is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It depends what you read on what day you read it. Some days they're in the quarterback market because they don't, people are saying they're not huge on Jalen Hurts, but then why'd you trade Carson Wentz? And then other days, okay,
Right.
their guy. Again, I think they're in that same position as New York. It's offensive line, skill players. They do need to get some defensive help. I think the Eagles are trending in the wrong direction.
They absolutely are. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really think they need help everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have some cap problems that cause them to cut a lot of people. I just feel like you really can't draft a quarterback if you're Philadelphia because to me it's a wasted pick for them. They have so many other needs at so many other positions that if they're going to do that, so I don't think that's a need. I think to me the most glaring need for them is wide receiver. At least on the offensive side of the ball, they need a receiver. They do not have a top quality pass catcher on that roster, and they need one. At 12, will they get one? I don't know, but if they were ever going to draft somebody at a spot, that would probably be the best thing to do. If they don't get that, though, I think maybe they go for a corner or a safety because the secondary is not very good, and that would be a spot that I would say they could go for sure.
All right. Moving to the Chargers at number 13. Obviously, you have Justin Herbert now. They need a tight end now. They lost Hunter in free agency, so I think they need a tight end. Will there be one worthy at that point? We'll talk about that next week. I think they could use some help in the secondary. And really, that is looking at who you have to face in order to compete in your division.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Chiefs there. You have the Raiders, who at times can be dynamic offensively, and then you got the Broncos, who don't really have a quarterback. But if you want to compete with the Chiefs, you need guys that can cover their receivers and get after the quarterback. So I think for the Chargers, their offense was good last year.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a rookie quarterback. So I think they're going to focus more on defense. They should focus on defense, unless at that position there's a guy that slides. That would be just another dynamic playmaker on offense that would make your offense to the next level.
Yeah, I think that they could potentially get an offensive lineman, but I personally see them needing a safety. You were spot on. I think with the secondary, I think that's probably the biggest need they have, especially in that division. They could go corner, but I feel like personally that they're going to draft a safety. That's one of the biggest needs they have on their team, and that would be, to me, for that pick where they'd want to go with it. So as their biggest need.
All right. Next up, the Minnesota Vikings. Last year everybody raved about their draft because they rebuilt that secondary. And we were both, they're all rookie.
Not so
much. They did hit a home run with Justin Jefferson. I'll give them that. I think they're going to focus either offense or defensive line here. They still have a handicap on that roster.
Yeah.
And his name's Kirk Cousins. Again, stat machine. stat machine, but he's has one playoff win in his entire career.
Right. And last year he was not very good.
Right. And how long are you going to be able to build a roster around Kirk Cousins and eventually say, before you say he's the problem?
Right.
And that's the issue. I think Minnesota's the front office is in denial that he's the problem. Now, obviously, they're not going to draft a quarterback, and I don't think
No.
you would
Unless they take somebody in a late round or something.
right later in the maybe middle of the draft if a guy's there.
Right.
But again, I think they focus on the lines. They've lost a lot on that defense, all over the field. Now the last two off seasons. Offensively, you have two of the most dynamic players on offense at skill positions in Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and then you have Adam Thielen.
I was gonna say, don't forget about Adam Thielen.
And then I'm not sure remember who their tight end is.
Yeah, Rudolph left, so I don't know who their tight end is.
But the reason he left was because they have another guy that's just better.
Yeah.
So
I mean, offensively, I think the main problem is Kirk Cousins and the offensive line.
Right.
Exactly. And they're not doing anything about Cousins because they gave him that fat extension with all that money that he didn't deserve. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I mean, they're probably going to go defensive line because that's the biggest need I think they have, but their offensive line, I could just as easily see them take an offensive lineman here.
Yeah.
But I think they'll probably go defensive line because that's still a big glaring need for them too.
Right.
For sure.
All right. Moving on to the New England Patriots. Obviously, I think they are still in the market for a quarterback. I would not rule them out. I don't think they're done moving around in the draft. But I think if they can make a move, I think they're going to draft a quarterback this draft, whether it's early on or if they take a guy to develop. I know they signed Cam Newton, but again, they signed him for another 1-year deal. That tells you right there he's kind of
a long-term solution.
Yeah, he's an insurance plan. Right. So I really think that they will be looking at quarterback. Other than that, they need receivers. They need offensive help. I think defensively they're going to be okay because and I was talking to a couple people about this yesterday, and that they're like, "Oh, the Patriots are going to be bad." I go, you have to remember last year, and I don't remember how many really off the top of my head. They had multiple defensive starters opt out of last year.
They did
because of COVID.
Yeah. Yep.
They're going to be back. So you have to remember that. You have to remember that aspect of this. So I really think they're going to focus on the offense and really start rebuilding this thing. Now, are they going to be division contenders? Probably not. But they're going to be better than last year.
I think that's a great and interesting division for a lot of different reasons. But yeah, I mean, quarterback is probably the biggest need that this team has. No more Tom Brady. This is life after Tom Brady. And Cam Newton, like you said, definitely the insurance policy. At 15, they're not necessarily going to get one of the top-rated guys, but I could see one of those, 5 quarterbacks that people are talking about still being available at 15. And depending on who it is, Bill Belichick isn't necessarily going to care. He might take that person if he thinks that that's their guy. He could mold them into the guy that he needs them to be. Or he could trade back and try to get somebody else later. But quarterback to me is the biggest glaring need here. They do have some needs. Other than that, like you said, at receiver, I really do agree with that. Some people have said they have needs at corner or linebacker. Yeah, they do, but again, like you said, people opted out. They'll be back. I don't see that defense as being a huge problem, especially early on. So the biggest need to me is QB.
All right, moving on to the Cardinals. You look at this team. I think they're gonna focus on the O line here, maybe secondary, but then also running back. This is where I think that the running back would come into play, middle of the first round. They don't really have a dynamic running back,
No,
and that's going to create an issue. But I really think again they have a young quarterback. You have you have good receivers. Your line, though, as the season went on, that line, offensive line, just got manhandled by good defenses. So I think they're going to really focus on offensive line, though at least they should. But I know it's a team you really were high on last year.
I kind of felt like they were going to be better, and they kind of petered out as the season wore on. And there's some reasons for that, but I think the biggest needs for this team are corner and running back. Their secondary is not, to me, it's not very good. They absolutely need a dynamic corner, and they could get one at this spot in the draft. But I agree with you more. I mean, on the running back situation, I think corner is probably where they have the biggest need. But running back, if you put a running back there that can complement Kyler Murray and the weapons that they have at the receiving spot, you could have a really, really good dynamic offense, and that makes up for some of the defensive weaknesses that you might have, because they'd have even more options on offense. So
Right.
I feel like they would go corner. That's the biggest need. But if they don't, I feel like running back would be their next option.
All right. Next up, the Las Vegas Raiders. In my opinion here, it is offensive line. They've traded away offensive linemen. I'm not really sure what John Gruden was doing here in this offseason.
I don't know.
I mean, I know 2 years ago, he traded Khalil Mack and all these other things, and people are like, "Oh my Lord!" And I came to his defense. I was like, you know what? He's stockpiling draft picks. Well, you have guys in place, and then you get rid of them. I didn't understand that.
This offseason, these moves.
These were strange moves. So I really think they need offensive line, obviously. Again, I think they're kind of in the same boat as New England is, though. If you have one of those 5 quarterbacks slide down to 17 for some reason, I wouldn't be shocked if they take him. Because you got Carr, but obviously they're not sold on Carr. You have Mariota there. They're both aging quarterbacks, and they're good quarterbacks, but they're not the guy. So I think O-line quarterback there. I think they're good at tight end. They're good at running back. I think they got decent receivers. Their defense is okay. I think they could use some secondary help again, the division that they're in. But I think O-line and possibly quarterback early in the draft is where they should be looking at. Again, they shouldn't have to be looking at that, but they made just some bizarre moves.
Yeah. I mean, there are some things I could talk about here in terms of their needs, but I'm just going to say O-line because, yeah, you can't make those moves and then not do that. No matter who's under center, you have to
Yeah.
give them people to protect them. I know what you're doing. So to me, their most glaring absolute need is the O-line. And whether that's right guard or right tackle, whatever it is, you need an offensive lineman, and that's absolutely where they need to go before anywhere else, in my opinion.
All right. Next up would be the Dolphins. We already talked Dolphins, so we're gonna skip over that and go to the Washington football team. Really, the next two teams, they're kind of in the next two teams are getting penalized for being good.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because they're both their biggest needs are quarterback.
They really are. Yeah.
And we'll just talk about it's Washington and Chicago.
Right.
They got penalized because they were good. They need quarterbacks, but they're not going to get one.
Right. And we'll talk about whether, they trade up or any of that
Right.
stuff. But right now, they both need quarterbacks. Yep.
But they're I think their biggest needs is quarterback. I think Washington also can use some offensive linemen to help whoever the quarterback's going to be. Chicago needs skill players too. Their whole offense needs to be overhauled. There, including their coach and their GM, but that's not part of the draft. But I really think both those teams are going to look O-line, quarterback at some point. Chicago needs receivers, running back. Their defense is solid. Same with Washington. I like their defense, but I think both those teams offensively need help everywhere.
Yeah, what I would like to see from Washington personally, and then they do have needs here, would be to, at least at the top end of the draft, they've got Ryan Fitzpatrick, and so they've got serviceable quarterbacks. I'd like to see them get somebody dynamic, like at linebacker or safety, something like that, where they really make that defense 3 layers deep good. And when they do that, then maybe they could draft a quarterback later in the draft. But I think they have a need there. And I think they have more of a need there to make their defense even more into the elite category. And then the Bears, they have more of a need at the QB spot, even more than Washington, I think, because this team just can't get it right at quarterback. They just can't. So here's the problem, though, for Chicago and Chicago fans. Yeah, you need a quarterback, but Ryan Pace is still drafting for you, so it's not going to matter in this draft.
Yeah.
But they do have an absolute glaring need at quarterback. Now, I agree. I mean, they have some other issues, as far as what they should get. Their defense is pretty solid, like you said. But yeah, I think outside of that, O-line would be the next spot. That's the biggest need for Chicago. Yeah.
All right, Indianapolis. If you're looking at a team that doesn't have a ton of holes, it'd be Indianapolis. I think their biggest need probably would be receiver. They got great running backs. They got a great line. I think Wentz will be a good quarterback. Their defense is solid. They could use probably some secondary help, maybe some D-line. But I think their main focus here is going to be upgrading the receivers in their secondary and seeing what they can do here. They're going to be a fun team to watch if Wentz can return to his form before he got hurt in the Super Bowl year.
I think, they lost their left tackle who retired. They could consider that at this particular pick, but you're right. They don't have a ton of needs Well, another receiver would be great. I think adding some depth there to make a really solid offense all the way around because they've got good running backs, and they have some good receivers already. So if Wentz can step into that with a really good offensive line, um, so I don't know. I'm not quite sure what direction they might go because they could go a couple different ones. They don't have a glaring need. You're right.
Right. Tennessee, I really think, you got I think they finally got to a point where they believe in their offensive system. I think they're solid offensively. Defensively, they need help.
Yeah.
They need help in the secondary. They need help at linebacker. I'm not as down on their D line as some people are, but I think they're going to focus a lot on defense this draft. Because that is what got them to the AFC Championship game 2 years ago, was defense. And last year they took a big dip in defense. And I think that showed that the year before they have okay defensive talent, but Vrabel really did a great job of putting those guys in a position to be successful. But then teams figured it out. They figured out where the weaknesses were, and now they have to upgrade those weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah. And they talked about, I've seen some articles about them upgrading at the wide receiver position, which, yeah, they could use that. I'm not going to dispute that, but more of a need to me is their defense. I agree. I mean, they brought Jadeveon Clowney and Vic Beasley in, and those guys did not work out. I'm more of the mindset personally to go defensive line as opposed to what you had been talking about. I think more the D line than not. But I'm not disputing that they need help at other levels. I feel like that would be the better spot for them to go, would be along the D line, because their pass rush last year was anemic. That's probably the best way I can describe it.
Right.
It was not good. So that's what I would say.
All right. Next up will be the Jets. We've already talked about them. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Again, I think they are a team that is getting penalized for being good.
Yeah.
I think they have more needs than what people are saying they need. They need offensive line. They need defensive line. I think they could use some upgrade at linebacker. I think their only position where I'm like, yeah, they're pretty solid there is receiver. Other than that, I think they could go a ton of different directions here. You lost Bud Dupree.
I mean, he did go to Tennessee, so if that works out, maybe for the Titans, but I still think they go D line.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I think Pittsburgh is going to regress big time this year, in that division alone, because you eventually they have to start thinking about a successor to Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
They have to, and they keep putting it off. And
Mason Rudolph is not the answer.
no. So, again, I think if you're Pittsburgh, you look at, we need to start rebuilding, getting back to what we used to do: run the football, power football, and play really good defense. So I think they need to focus on O-line and defense, and then find a young quarterback, and try to get Roethlisberger hopefully to stay, for another year after this year. So you give the kid, they draft 2 years to sit and watch and learn the NFL, and then come in and just run the ball the first year or two that the young quarterback plays.
Yeah, it's unusual to me to see a team that was 12-4 and picking this late in the draft have so many needs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, that really they have more needs than some of the teams above them. I think. I don't know. That's what it seems like to me because, like you just outlined, there are so many areas on both sides of the ball that they're lacking. if you're going to make a guy successful, give him a left tackle to work out. I mean, they need offensive line help, but they need defensive line help. Their secondary, their corners, and they lost a bunch of corners. They really need a corner. So yeah, they could go a ton of different ways at this spot, and I think it's going to probably be who's available at that point to more see what route they're going to go. Like what's the best player that's still available there? Because they could go secondary or they could go with an offensive lineman, but it just really kind of depends where. And there's so many different needs for this team. I absolutely agree. I think they will regress.
Right. Next, Jaguars. We talked about the next team, the Cleveland Browns. They're quietly turning into a team that's pretty solid. They signed to Jadeveon Clowney, which okay. I mean, I think he's kind of a second-tier D lineman now.
He is, yeah.
I think they could focus and get if there's available, get a D lineman. I think they could still improve their secondary a little bit, but I think they focused on defense here. Again, their running backs are good, the receivers are good. If they're sold on Baker Mayfield, maybe you try and you want some more O-line help. You get some O-linemen. But I really think you focus on defense and getting some depth on that defense. Again, you have to look at who you have to play to get to the Super Bowl. You have Buffalo and Kansas City you need to compete with.
Right.
You almost beat Kansas City last year. If it wouldn't have been for a fumble, they probably would have won that game. But again, defensively, you have to be able to hold up against those high-powered offenses. I don't think their defense is at that level yet. So I really think they're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball in this draft.
Yeah. I mean, we've agreed on some, we've disagreed on some. In this case, I couldn't agree more. I mean, they have a formula on offense that works. And, they'll probably end up getting somebody on the offensive side of the football a little later in the draft, but especially right away as far as a need. It's either at the defensive line or the cornerback spot that they have the most glaring need at. And yeah, to compete at an elite level, they're going to need to get a guy at that spot, one of those two spots.
All right. Next up, the Baltimore Ravens. Again, it's weird to sit here and say a team that's picking 27th in the first round has a lot of needs.
Yeah.
But they do.
Mm-hmm.
They need help at receiver. They need help at running back. They need help on the O-line. I think defensively, they're not too bad. I'm going to say too bad because I still think they have some areas there, but I think they're going to focus on offense and try to really start putting some pieces around Lamar Jackson because everybody can say, oh, look what he did at the end of the year. Yeah, he went back to forget all you pieces of trash that you have that I have on the field with me. I'm going to just do it myself.
Yeah.
And it showed that he can get them to the playoffs that way, but they're never going to win the Super Bowl like that. And so I really
absolutely, and that's been proven 2 years in a row in the playoffs.
Yeah, so I really think they're going to focus on offense, receiver, and O-line the most, and then maybe in the middle of the draft get a running back to add some depth. Because Dobbins, though he's good, I don't think he is a elite type running back in the NFL.
No, he's not. Yeah, I mean, they did lose a couple of guys along the defensive line, so it's possible, they go with an edge rusher or somebody there. But I agree that this is the time when you need to rebuild your offense, or at least just make it better. I mean, They signed Sammy Watkins, but that's not going to get it done on the offensive side of the football. They need a dynamic wide receiver, and if you can't get one where you're drafting early on, they absolutely need um, an offensive lineman. Absolutely need an offensive lineman badly.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do need more skill players. But yeah, they're in a world of hurt. I think they need to do that. So.
All right. Next up, the New Orleans Saints. Again, their biggest need they're not going to be able to address quarterback. They got. I think they're good at receiver. They're good at running back. I think they could use help almost at every level of the defense, and then O-line. You are going to have a average quarterback, if not below average quarterback, under center. You need to have a solid O-line in front of them because you do have the benefit they have is you have one of the best running backs and one of the best wide receivers on the field. To take some pressure off the quarterback, but you have to have a line to block for Kamara. And I think they have a couple holes there. But again, every level of the defense, I think, could use a little bit of an upgrade because, again, it showed later in the year that defense got exposed, just like it has year after year. When Drew Brees is there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they could get another receiver because after Michael Thomas, they don't have much receiver-wise. But I don't think that's their biggest need because they have two of the most dynamic offensive players on their squad on that side, on that part of the field. So I think more defensively, they have some guys who are really, really good yet, but you want to pair them off with somebody else. So I think personally they will probably go here, either corner or defensive end. That's how I see it for New Orleans. And they have the most need at that spot.
All right. Next up, the Green Bay Packers. Obviously, the talking point is, what do they do here? Do you build around, you give Aaron Rodgers another weapon? Do you add to the defense? I think they could use a dynamic receiver here if one's available.
Right.
Whether they'll do that in the first round or not, I don't know. They could use some depth in the O-line in the draft.
Yeah, they just lost Lane Taylor, so yeah.
But I really, really think they need to find some dynamic defensive playmakers. You don't have a linebacker that's a guy that you can put out there and that's going to run around the field and make plays. You don't have a safety out there Amos is good. Don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. But you don't have that Leroy Butler, that Charles Woodson type guy in that secondary that basically takes away half of a field.
Right. And Savage has been, a hard hitter, but he's been injured some too, and he just isn't quite there yet.
So in the draft, I think they're going to address receiver. They're going to address the O-line. But I think early on, and this is going to infuriate Packer fans, but I think they are going to address the defense.
I think they should. I mean, if there's a corner that's available here, that would be where I would say they would want to go. I mean, Kevin King is inadequate in my opinion. Jaire Alexander is, elite. So give him somebody who could be on the field to work with him as another corner. That's to me one of the biggest needs that they have that they should address here. And receiver too, but I think corner is even more of a need.
Yeah, I think again this draft is rich in receivers.
Yeah.
and I think you can get a really good receiver in the third round. So I think they'll get a receiver
A guy. Yeah.
in the first half of the draft. He's not going to be a guy that steps in day one, but you don't need a guy to step in day one as a starter. You have Lazard, you have Adams, you have Funchess, you have Tunyon, you have Jones.
Yeah, they've got plenty of
You
playmakers
got
on
offensive
both sides of the
talent.
ball.
So,
Right.
that's why I really
I don't think they need to go receiver with this first pick.
and I think the Goodson, think he is has a long-term plan in his head that he wants to build a really strong defense. So when Rodgers is gone, their offense doesn't have to be elite.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's going to start laying that foundation. He has to, because Rodgers could be gone after this season. We don't know. And
Yeah, we really don't. Yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, like I talked to a couple of young Packer fans. Oh no, Rodgers is going to be here until he wants to be gone.
Maybe.
Say that. If they win the Super Bowl, Rodgers will retire. He is very adamant that he really enjoyed hosting Jeopardy.
Yeah.
And there's rumors that they're going to offer him the job.
Right.
Well, if that's something you want to do, and he's getting married, if he's ready to start the next phase of his life.
I think, when I was watching an interview with him, and we digress a little bit on this, but he was talking about how he thought he could do both. But I really, he said he has the passion, the fire, because he still has some things to accomplish. My feeling is, I interpret that as I still want to win another Super Bowl.
Right.
That's the accomplishment. He's done every other thing you could possibly want.
He wants a
interpreting
second
that from him
championship.
as he wants a ring. Yeah.
Yeah. And if he gets that second one, he's done.
Yeah, I think he would be done. I agree.
So, but moving on, we'll talk more about that as we move through here. The Buffalo Bills. Wow.
Not a ton of needs.
And not a ton of needs. I think you look at it. I think you try to upgrade maybe a little bit in the O-line, add some depth to the defense, maybe add another running back. I know I like Zach Moss, but this day and age you kind of need two guys in that backfield.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't need a ton, but I think they have a really good chance of adding some depth there around Josh Allen on offense and solidifying that defense, and really be a nuisance to Kansas City and being that team that can win the AFC.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe at corner, just really locking down that secondary. So when you do face those top flight offenses, you're really locked in. That might be where they go, because right now, yeah, they're at the point now where they're elite. Okay, this is a really good team. I feel like maybe they go that route at corner, as a need. Not that they have bad corners, but to really put yourself at that next level, have that extra guy. That's the route they'd go.
All right, Kansas City. When you look at this team, I think they need O-line. You released both your starting tackles. So I think they need O-line and defensive help at every level. Again, I said this 2 years ago when Patrick Mahomes signed this big contract.
Yeah.
This was going to start to happen. And you start to see it this offseason. They've had to release guys. Guys are leaving because they want to get paid. And they don't have the money.
Right.
And, I understand Patrick Mahomes is really, really good. but
It's just going to make it more difficult to fill in all those spots around
the,
on
the,
the field. Yeah.
for a team that was just in the Super Bowl, they're probably one of the more uneasy teams, I think, going into next season
Yeah.
to whether they can stay on top. When I look at the 4 teams that were in the conference championship games, I'm pretty confident that 3 of the 4 are going to be right back in the mix. Green Bay, Tampa Bay, and Buffalo. Kansas City, you're right there because you have Patrick Mahomes. But if he wavers at all,
or gets injured,
you're in trouble because that offensive line is not going to be as good this year. You lost you're starting 2 tackles. So
yeah, I think that you look at it. They signed Joe Thuney from the Patriots, but they need offensive line help. I know that that's probably something that may be a broken record, and other people will be saying, okay, well they need an edge rusher, they need this, they need that. You have one of the top 5, top 3, I don't know, whatever you want to put him. He's one of the best quarterbacks in football. Keep him upright because you want to get back to the Super Bowl. This team isn't going to measure itself by winning the division at this point. I think they're not quite in that decline. So if they want to measure themselves by winning championships and protect your quarterback and draft an offensive lineman, I honestly don't really feel like there's any other pick that they should make if there's a quality offensive lineman that's available at that spot. So
right. And then we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. When you look at it, not a ton of glaring needs, but when you look at their roster, it's an old roster.
it really is. Yeah.
So you're not really looking at needs this coming season. You're looking at needs a year or 2 years from now. And that's what this draft is. This draft is you get these young guys in here, they learn under these veterans. So when the veterans retire, you now have experienced guys ready to play. So you pick. Now maybe somebody slides down that can help you. I think defensive line maybe. You could find a possible guy that could rotate in there and be a playmaker as a rookie. But I think other than that, I think it's more of developing depth and young guys to eventually take over because you're aging. That roster is aging, and that's somebody that went out and got Brady. They knew their roster was aging, and they knew they had to do it. It was now or rebuild the entire thing again.
Yeah.
Which I give them props for. For. Now again, we talk about the NFC Championship game and the officiating and whatnot. You know what? It is what it is. I give the Buccaneers front office props for doing what they did and building that thing and winning a Super Bowl. That was a good job.
They put themselves in a position to win the title game, and they did.
So I really, like I said, you look at it, and I don't think they can really go wrong. They're sitting here kind of like Kansas City was for a couple of years, and they were just picking the best available guy out there and adding depth. And I think that's where Tampa Bay is at right now. But at the same time, they're looking at all those different positions and being like, okay, is there a guy out here that we can get in here and groom for a year or two to eventually take over?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, to me, this team needs to fill in behind some of the veterans that I think personally are probably going to get injured over the course of the year. Because they do have an aging roster. So, in a lot of spots, not everywhere, but in a lot of spots. And I agree to groom for that next level because this roster is intact mostly from last year. There's some pieces that are different, but this is it. I mean, this is the only year that it's going to be intact again.
Right.
It's not going to look like this the following year. So you have to build in this draft. I agree. I think defensive line would be a good place for them to go. Maybe running back. It depends. I mean, I'm not sold on their running backs, but their offense was good enough. So
Right. Are there any teams that did not have a first round draft pick?
yeah, we did
Seattle.
miss a couple here.
Seattle?
was one. I think
The
the Rams
Rams?
maybe. Yeah.
Well, the Rams.
If there's
Well,
anybody
probably
else there.
Seattle. They need to fix their offensive line.
Yeah.
In my opinion, what they're going to be able to do, I don't know. You don't have a first round draft pick.
They only have 3 picks in the whole draft.
So I unfortunately, last year I liked Seattle. I don't like Seattle going into this season.
No,
I really don't. You have some nice players on offense, but at the same time, you don't have a ton, throughout that entire roster.
right.
The Rams,
And they have some good players on that defense, but they have some glaring holes on that defense too.
So you look at the Rams, and they, they're. I think they need to probably focus on getting some receivers. They need to solidify the offensive line. You now have a legit quarterback.
Right.
So you need to keep him upright. But then now with the whole Aaron Donald situation, you need to possibly look at solidifying some defensive line help as well.
Right.
So,
Yeah, exactly.
So that's where I think they need to focus on.
Yeah, to me, it's all about offensive line for them because, like you said, you brought in Matthew Stafford. He's young enough that you're going to get a couple of years or more out of him. But you actually have a legit quarterback who's really good, proven. Keep him healthy and upright. That was the problem in Detroit year after year after year. They kept missing on the offensive line, not having a good offensive line. This team needs to have an offensive line that can keep him as clean as possible. And he will. I think that's more important even than a receiver. I mean, they could use another receiver, but I think he's going to elevate their level of play where Jared Goff never did. And you have some guys there that can compete. So I just feel like offensive line is the first and foremost need for this team. And then, probably followed by defensive line.
Right. So, I think that's it.
I was just looking back to see if there's any other teams that we missed that didn't have a first rounder. We talked about them.
I think that's. I don't think there's anybody else.
No, I think we got everybody. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we did. So there you have it. Team needs for every team in the draft. And obviously next week we're going to delve into the draft itself in terms of who we think people will pick and what we think teams will do. We did get into that a little bit. We tried to stay away from that and just talk about needs, but we'll get into that a lot more next week in terms of who they're actually going to take or whether they're going to trade or what they're going to do. So
right. So yeah. Other than that, anything else, Loaf, that you want to talk about? I know there were a few sports stories out there. Not NFL related.
Right.
Aldridge retiring from the Nets.
Yeah. So much for that.
So, I think that could impact them a little bit.
Yeah. We weren't all necessarily sold on that addition, but you don't have them, then you're still with that need on that team. So I think that depth-wise, that makes any sort of championship run that much harder for them. So
right. Other than that, anything else that you can think of?
No, I didn't have anything else. I think we'll gear up for the NFL draft here and get ready for that in 2 weeks.
All right. Yeah. So again, we will be doing our mock draft picks next week. And then the following week, and we will be doing our live.
The show going on with the live draft, the first round.
So
much like last year. So the shock and surprise of anything that's going on, we'll get on there and we'll talk about it. We'll see how things go. So.
All right. Well, I thank everybody for listening. And we are looking forward to year two of our draft coverage. So yeah. Thank you, everybody. Have a great week, and we will talk to you next time.
Good night.
When it comes to trimming your balls, always use the right tool for the job.
Manscaped is the only
I left the stove on, so there's food for you to eat that I hope you choke on. And I wash your clothes with bleach. I left my phone on. Before I left, I cracked your screen and I left a note on. My Twitter you should read. It says, I'm not sorry for the things I said. You know you deserved it. All the times you wish that I was dead. You made me feel worthless. I'm not sorry for the way I was. And I hope you're hurting. Now I know that I was just in love with a person. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired of your bull. The cash I blew on you would've put diamonds on my whole wrist. Honestly, I'm glad that it's over. I hated your friends. I'm happy that I made you my ex. Yeah. I've been waiting to delete your number out of my phone. I know it's you if the color's unknown. You got a short fuse, and I don't need those explosions. I ain't gonna play with your teenage emotions. Welcome to the end. Whoa, the best you'll ever get. Whoa, I'm not yours. You don't know me no more. Heart emojis, get it through your head. Whoa, I wish you were dead. Whoa, I hope you're happy, lonely, no more heart emojis. Feel like my Instagram post. Leave a thumb up on every status I wrote. If I were you, then I would probably go ghost. How's it feel to never ever let go? Yo, you think you're a stack, but I'd rather have chips. You think making a voodoo doll's gonna make you a witch. You think grabbing on a man's gonna make you rich. And you ain't cute enough to act like a... You got stalker vibes, I should've known by your eyes, girl. No one really smiles that much, and I probably should've known it by the way that you lie, cause...